Hi, I'm Kat Rosenfield.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and we are Feminine Chaos. And today's topic to begin is going to be one that I know everybody is waiting for, which is the topic of leggings. Leggings, as in those tight pants that those women and girls and all sorts of people sometimes, and I know from Instagram, even poodles, sometimes wear leggings. So there have been a couple leggings. There's always a leggings story making the most read of whichever publication at any given time. It's always there just so that everybody can be like, is this what they report on these days? Leggings? Is this what the world has come to? So this is what the world has come to. We have reconciled ourselves to this or not. And the first leggings story is actually a reported feature in the New Yorker by Tolentino about the brand Outdoor Voices and its founder, Tyler Haney. So I guess before we go into stuff about that particular article, what are your thoughts on leggings generally and on those particular leggings, if indeed you have thoughts on those particular leggings?
Well, I wear leggings to work as a yoga instructor, so I wear them basically every day. And I'm not a particular brand loyalist when it comes to which kind of leggings I wear. But it is fascinating to me that they've become, something that's so utilitarian for me. Has become such a flashpoint for all of these various anxieties. And it's like about class, about sex, about, modesty. It's fascinating. Like you can, in these very tight pants, they're stretchy enough to accommodate all kinds of, serious cultural baggage.
That's right.
And to sculpt your ass.
Sometimes, if they're good ones.
Right. Yeah. I can strongly recommend, the American Eagle line is good with the ass sculpting. How many times am I going to say the words ass sculpting within the first 5 minutes of this podcast?
Just go for as many as possible. I mean, that's really what you want to do. Like those blocks of text where it's just, some phrase repeated.
Right. For emphasis.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, let's, but to return to the question of Outdoor Voices leggings specifically, I actually don't wear them, and I only know them from Instagram, where I once made the mistake of clicking on their account or like going through to their account, and now they are trying aggressively to get me to buy them. It's like every time I log in, they're right there.
Oh, no, that can happen. There's always some item, and the worst is when it's not even something. If I look at some shoes for my husband, then it'll be like you want men's hiking boots.
Yes,
they want men's hiking boots. I look for a second at some men's
the rest of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't even necessarily not want men's hiking boots for myself if they're nice and they fit. But that's not really in the market for that right now. But in terms of leggings, I'm going to share my leggings thoughts. I used to be very against the whole leggings as pants, not like, ban them from the world, but I used to think, oh no, that's not something for me. I don't want it. And then they're comfortable. I do wear them. And I guess the other thing is, though, I can't claim to have and this we'll get into more when we talk about the article itself, I can't claim to be at all above the sort of frivolous leggings interests. Like, I want them to be flattering, certainly, but also for a while in grad school, I was very fixated on the idea of the Lululemon $90 leggings and like the person I would be if I felt like financially together enough to be able to buy something like that, and what a big deal that would be. And like if I passed my qualifying exam, would I buy them? Or it was like this whole thing. Like I definitely, and I should say for context before you think, wow, this woman is even more of an idiot than I would have imagined. I was living at the time in Princeton, New Jersey, not affiliated with the university there in any way. But there's not a lot in that town that sort of, it's like either really, really posh or just kind of, it was for demographics like much sort of older and richer than me, or sort of for like kind of preppy college students, I guess. Mm-hmm. So this was like the one store in town that like that and J. Crew that could plausibly reach me in some way. Like I wasn't going to go into the store that only sells like silver candlesticks or like lacrosse equipment. So I was left with like Lululemon as the thing that I could like kind of, if I walked for like half an hour, get to. Yeah. So I kind of, I guess I get it about that kind of. It's, I see why something like that could be appealing, and not only because I can imagine being one of those women who would find something ridiculous appealing, but because I am. But now I live in Canada where that brand is, I think, a bit less expensive just because of the exchange rate and because it's a Canadian brand, and it's just a store. You know,
I didn't realize it was a Canadian brand.
It is.
But I think it's fascinating that, like as just yet another thing that Lululemon leggings can represent, they became like a benchmark for having reached a certain level of successful adulthood for you.
Absolutely. It seemed like the sort of, like I had leggings, but they were, not so flattering, or they would sort of pill a lot. And I would think, if I were somebody who felt comfortable spending $90 on leggings, I too could have those leggings that don't pill or whatever. And they pill, I can say eventually, but I guess I just, for my day-to-day life, especially when I'm in a stretch of time when I'm either, when I was writing my dissertation, or if I'm just, only going in to teach a couple times a week, or on maternity leave, certainly, or while massively pregnant, I needed to wear leggings because nothing else would stay up. I guess I don't really see why it's supposed to be so fraught to spend a lot on leggings, but it would be fine to spend a lot on jeans. It just depends what you wear. And yeah. But that's, but in terms of outdoor voices, though, that's where I have many thoughts as well.
Yes, they're everywhere. And
well, they're not in Canada, but I will say that you see these kind of like chic, wealthy looking young women in Toronto who have a tote bag from Outdoor Voices, which what that tells you is that they have either been to the States, or I guess possibly spent a lot on duty to get something shipped, because that can also be, that could be it. But when I was back in New York for a bit, I remember going in like at least twice to their store, because it's on this very pretty block in Soho next to the police building, Center Street, the British or Canadian spelling, I believe. That street that's next to the police building, in this kind of part of Soho where the Glossier headquarters also are, in Reformation, all the sort of cool girl brands. Mm-hmm. And I remember going in and thinking like, here I am where they sell this stuff that they don't sell in Canada, where I most of the time am, and it looks so cool. And I wish I were the sort of woman who would want to wear something like this. I just didn't want it. It just didn't do it for me. I'm not cool enough for that brand, I think. I think that was what made me so interested in this New Yorker article that came from a sort of a journalistic voice, too cool for the brand, that I personally did not feel cool enough for. So,
that's an interesting
that gets us kind of into the article maybe a bit itself. So we both read it, yes?
Yes, we did.
We did.
A fascinating piece of journalism by Gia Tolentino.
Yes, that's right. So where to begin?
Maybe by summing it up just a little bit.
Yes, good point. Yes. So it's basically a profile of the founder of this brand that also sort of contextualizes Outdoor Voices, the brand, in terms of this kind of millennial woman lifestyle, kind of go-getter. I almost want to say like Hillary Clinton 2016 candidacy vibe. Liberalism, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's like hashtag doing things. So they really are selling, and they thrive on doing not just having you take pictures of yourself in their leggings, and they use they have sponsorships, on Instagram with with various women, and they use ordinary looking women as models, which is a big thing, although not completely unheard of at this point. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and say that I don't think they're the first ones to do it, but they're doing it maybe more prominently than a lot of, sorry, we got a cat situation.
Oh, they're definitely not the first to be doing it. I mean, there's the Dove Real Beauty ads, and there's I think at this point, was it Reformation? There was some brand that definitely had like a larger model than the clothing they actually make. And that was controversial at one point. Yeah. But, well, what I thought was super interesting in the article in terms of these brands was this question of user-generated content, and that they sort of rely on fans of the brands, brand loyalists to hashtag doing things or whatever. And that's kind of how they sell the product.
And they organize activities where people can get together to do like branded stuff in their Outdoor Voices branded apparel. And I'm going to have to defend
that. I'm going to have to defend that phenomenon.
Oh, no, I think it's great.
But they don't even necessarily. So the Lululemon running group, which I pre-baby would go to often, you did not have to wear any particular brand to go to it, and it was free, and you could just go running with a group of people who admittedly were often wearing that brand because, again, it's Canada and it's popular here, but there was no requirement, and it definitely, it worked in terms of making me think less bad things about a brand. It forces you to go running.
Yeah, as somebody who works in the fitness industry, I've taught yoga classes at a Lululemon store before, and I've been one of their window models where, you go and you get in the window and you do yoga for an hour while people walk in and out and stare at you, which is actually a lot more fun than it sounds. But I will say that they are, in terms of how they approach like the fitness people who make up their clientele, particularly if you work in the industry, they make it easy for you to wear the clothes. They want you to wear the clothes, and like they're generous about, they have, their like affiliate thing where you sign up and you get a deep discount on the incredibly sculpting leggings. So
wow, that sounds, so we are not going to be taking the pitchforks to the athleisure stores just yet. Oh God,
no, I'd have nothing to wear.
I can hear my baby, but my husband is with her, so hopefully we may have to pause in a moment, but probably it should be okay. She's like got many thoughts on leggings, I'm sure, that she would like to share, but not quite there yet. The speech abilities. So that article, though, I guess what I thought was so fascinating about it was sort of the positioning of Outdoor Voices as this brand that's it's like going for like the most cool thing you could buy, what the cool kids wear, like the equivalent of like the Adidas Sambas in my 4th grade class or whatever, but like that's what, whatever the millennial women who are most cool would wear, as like not actually cool. So it's sort of about, so this is a quote from the article. Haney, that's the founder, has succeeded in part because the Lululemon founders' ritzy vision, picture Ocean, that's their imagined ideal customer, in black leggings and a rich mom tank top, has, for many younger women, become passé. And then the whole article is from this kind of journalistic voice of where Outdoor Voices itself is not cool. And perhaps even the whole thing is, if not passé, then just sort of like, it's a little trying too hard. And I guess what I found so interesting wasn't even so much about the leggings themselves as this sort of notion of a journalistic voice. And it's this common thing in journalism. There are a bunch of articles that we can talk about as well. I'd also have this where it's kind of like a woman is reporting on a phenomenon in a way where it kind of seems like she sees where the women who like it are coming from, but she also thinks they're sort of plainly ridiculous. And it seemed very much in the same, not exactly the same, but then there were some other articles just to, we're not going to probably go into them in detail, but there was one about goop that was it went a lot further. It was a different sort of article by Taffy Brodesser-Ackner, and then there was one by Molly Young about so Goop, that's Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle universe. Then there was Molly Young, another great writer, on Amanda Chantal Bacon, who does this moon juice, these like powders or something, some kind of health thing. And then there was a lot of writing by like Marissa Meltzer about wellness. So just like this sort of, it seemed to fit really with this, like, I guess it's like, is it highbrow or like upper middle brow, like wellness coverage, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Where it's like the women who are into that are not mocked exactly, but like maybe considered a little bit ridiculous. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's this, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that falls into this genre, and I think that I see it for, in a slightly different light, as more being about what role the journalist sees themselves as having when it comes to writing one of these profiles. And one of the interesting things about this Outdoor Voices profile was that you got this sense that Outdoor Voices and the founder were being kind of judged for being too earnest and not cool, even though they themselves were supposed to be cooler than, the Lululemon culture that they were a counterculture to. So this was like countercultural to the counterculture, I guess.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, there are a couple quotes from the article that I think will kind of get us right to this sort of the center of this world's current most pressing topic, which we definitely write. I mean, Kat, you would agree, right? This is definitely, in the entire world, we surveyed the entire world for what's the most urgent, and we were like, we're on it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. This is vital.
So I want to just be clear about that. Okay. Yeah. So
that one commenter who always complains about us talking about fluffy stuff is probably
for him.
Just for him. Ripping his hair out right now.
It's for you, guy. Or
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple. So I should just first off say that I think like Gia Tolentino, the writer of this piece, is so much cooler than I am. She's younger than I am. I'm sure she's just like so much cooler than I am. She writes for the New Yorker. She's just very cool. You know what I mean? Like she's cool. And I'm not the least cool person to ever exist, but I'm like the second least cool. So that's my non-coolness discllaimer.
Yeah, just full on. Like I think we're both deeply envious of Gia Tolentino.
Of course, I think
levels.
So many. She's one of these writers who, like there's just, it's one thing if a writer's a bit younger than I am. It's one thing if they write for the New Yorker. It's one thing if she's also very beautiful, and it's it's all which she kind of mentions in the piece, but kind of doesn't. It's kind of interesting, but I think this gets to another journalistic voice topic, which is I find it kind of very frustrating when people cover something like this and don't mention that they are jealous of the writer they're talking about. I think why not mention it? Why not mention it? Because it'll be obvious. But there's this line in the piece. So she mentions twice in the piece that she herself personally doesn't spend that much on workout wear. So it's not even just this comes up once, it comes up twice at least. In this one quote, she writes, "I work out regularly, but only in sale rack offerings from Old Navy and Target, and only by walking my dog and attending group fitness classes that allow me to lie down." And so there's that. And then this other similar quote where a nutritionist is speaking to some Outdoor Voices related group, and she writes that this nutritionist said 80 to 90% of what you eat should have a point. And then she said, okay, that's the quote, and then everyone nodded. And then I'm still quoting Gia Tolentino's article. "I pictured the sausage, egg, and cheese bagel sandwich I'd eaten on the train to Boston. It had a point, I thought. I was hungover before I ate it, and after I ate it, I was not hungover anymore." And it's like this funny sort of self-deprecation where it's like, if you don't know what she looks like, you could imagine that she's saying this because she's decided she is so, like, her feminist principles are such that she doesn't care what she looks like. And I have no idea if she does or doesn't care what she looks like, but the fact that she's very beautiful and conventionally so does something to that self-deprecation. And it's like, it's kind of like the Liz Lemon thing that people always complain about, where like a woman who's not large will sort of be like, oh, I just eat so much. And I don't know.
I mean, I think we should, we may as well, like, without necessarily trying to divine the contents and condition of Gia Tolentino's heart. She does have very high maintenance hair. She's
open about that and wrote a really compelling article actually about having it done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we can safely say that, yes, she does care what she looks like.
I think everybody does care. And I guess while I, again, cop to massive jealousy, I think she is an amazing writer. Mm-hmm. And I think she does sort of, I think it's hard to avoid this trap of wanting to seem low maintenance and wanting to be relatable in your high maintenance-ness too, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I guess in terms of how this particular article played out, I guess I felt like there was because of the way the author positioned herself in it, I felt like I had to position myself somehow also personally in it, if that makes sense. It's like just something like it's all about the body and about personal spending habits, all these very like fraught and personal things. And I somehow felt like I'm the slightly older lady who really doesn't want to look as flabby in the leggings. And like, what could be less cool? You know what I mean? What could be less cool than that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, if Gia Tolentino weren't young and beautiful and thin and talented, I don't think that an audience would necessarily be so tolerant of her taking the angle and the tone in a profile like this that she did. But she is super cool, and she's kind of an aspirational figure, obviously, for us, and I think also for a lot of the people who are reading the New Yorker or reading this profile are more likely to want to be Gia Tolentino than they are to want to be the founder of Outdoor Voices.
I think that's right, but I do think that the example of Taffy Brodesser-Akner on Gwyneth Paltrow is maybe a bit of a counterexample, because there it's super self-deprecating. But she talks about herself being like in her 40s and not particularly thin, and basically that she's like, she genuinely does not look like Gwyneth Paltrow, which is fine. Who does, except for Gwyneth Paltrow? Mm-hmm. But where the self-deprecation is kind of, it's not the Liz Lemon self-deprecation. I mean, somebody will always say like, but like there are people, like she's still very pleasant looking person, but you know what I mean, like where there's I think there's a difference between the sort of the sausage, egg, cheese, bagel comment from somebody who has prioritized not worrying about what they eat over, like, yeah.
This is making
and I just feel,
so
me too. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
we got to stop talking about the bagel. But it's funny that the Gwyneth Paltrow profile is, it does offer a counterpoint. It also had I think a very different tone than the Outdoor Voices profile. And the thing that it has in common with it, and this was sort of where maybe we could segue into talking a little bit about how profiles like this fit into the larger journalistic landscape, is that there's been this evolution, I think, away from taking a very neutral approach when you're writing about somebody or something, where I think that maybe there was a time where being almost, I don't necessarily want to say contemptuous, because that's not really the tone in this profile, but it is something that creeps into other journalism of this type, where you've got this sense of the journalist being kind of openly contemptuous of their subject, and where that wouldn't have necessarily been like considered professional or appropriate, but now it's much more commonplace. We see journalists as maybe playing this role more, where they're not just reporting on something or presenting something in this kind of objective way so that readers can form their own opinions on it, but trying to kind of guide you to a certain conclusion about what kind of person this is and whether they're good or bad, or how.
But also what sort of person the journalist is, I think, and that has to do with the sort of the personal branding of everybody today, but also especially journalists on Twitter, on social media in general, and that the subtext of many of these articles is the author, the journalist who wrote the piece, is either cool or, more often, I would say, a good person.
Yeah, a moral authoritarian.
And, yeah. So, I mean, I'm perfectly happy to, if the subtext of an article is that Gia Tolentino is very cool, I
don't disagree.
That seems accurate. But I guess we were also discussing, and this is going to seem, so for the seriousness preferring readers, oh my goodness, I don't even know what we're doing. Commenters, the seriousness preferring commenters. We're going to shift gears now, although not really because it's the same theme, to talk about BHL, Bernard-Henri Lévy, the French philosophe, je parle français maintenant? No, I can do it in English. Who famous for his white button-down shirts, yes, but also for his politics that would be what would sometimes maybe be considered neoconservative in the US, and yet he's French. What's that about? Well, I will now hold forth for 5 hours on Algerian Jewish history and the Crémieux Decree that made Algerian Jews French citizens in 1870. We can talk about that and how that relates to BHL. But anyway, we will not do that. Instead, we will talk just about this Isaac Chotiner New Yorker profile.
Yeah. Speaking of being intimidated by somebody's coolness, everything that you just did makes me want to just go back to school.
It's not worth it. It's much, no, then you're out of school and you're too old for the Outdoor Voices crop top.
Ooh,
which is how I feel right now.
I think I'm probably already too old for it.
But yeah, so this basically, it's this profile of, so Bernard-Henri Lévy is one of these people who's like, and I've heard him speak and found him kind of hilarious, but that's kind of the point. Like, he's both super serious and like super silly. It's hard to explain without like, just find like some YouTube of him or something to get a sense of it, where he's like, almost like a caricature of a French philosopher or like a French public intellectual, where he just like, he clearly takes himself very seriously. He thinks he's like saving the world in all sorts of ways. And maybe sometimes he'll be on the right side of something. Sometimes he won't be on the right side of something. The side he takes on all sorts of things, I think, is very informed by aspects of his identity that don't always quite translate in the US context. And I think that's part of what happened in this interview, where why was Bernard-Henri Lévy defending Roman Polanski and that Dominique Strauss-Kahn?
Right. That was apparently a scandalous thing.
And I mean, I guess it's both the French thing, and I think I certainly don't think all people who are Jewish would defend these men. I am Jewish. I do not defend these. You know what I mean? Like, that's not my stance, but I think that has something to do with like a weird sort of, and I will not go into this too much right now because I will maybe on a later podcast about something else, but the Dreyfus affair and this sort of notion of justice. And I feel like there are sort of like, and also with there was a line in the New Yorker interview where something about how he's controversial for his support for the burqa ban. I was thinking, like, is he controversial in France for this, or is it that this is a stance that many hold in France, but that, and I think is rightly considered controversial in the States?
Yeah.
So that was some of it. But the end, though, of the article is where I think it fits in with what we were talking about just before, right? Like, where the interviewer positions himself as the voice of good, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is a good example of a piece where the interviewer is clearly and openly contemptuous of his subject. And that, but when you saw the reactions to it, and I think in general, because you also saw this with the profile that, or the interview rather, that Chotiner did with Ian Bruma,
Yes.
From what was a New York Review of Books,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, people seek out his interviews because they want to see him like totally destroy.
Yes, the totally destroy. Which, and I feel like I can't say for sure that the same people have had different reactions to this, to these two things, so I don't know. But I feel like it went out of style to say that like John Oliver or John Stewart, I'm really dating myself here, totally destroyed so and so, you know, like that whole sort of liberal, or like Samantha Bee totally destroyed, like you might see that on Facebook but you wouldn't see it on Twitter, sort of thing. Like that's like a little bit not so fashionable on the left, certainly, to say that somebody totally destroyed somebody else when clearly they did not actually destroy them.
They don't use that terminology, but the sentiment is still there.
But then, no, but I think even, I'm not sure if I saw destroy, but I saw similar to that. And it seemed like he was a bit of an easy target, but also like I just wasn't quite clear what the point was. It's like, definitely he's wrong on certain things, and that was coming up in this interview, but it also just wasn't unknown, and it wasn't really but I guess what it was, like what you're talking about, Kat, with the inserting oneself into the story. So it's the way the interview ends with this where I guess was there some sort of problem with their connection or something, and he says, the interviewer says, "Sir, can you hear me?" And then he says, I'm here," and then he repeats, "I just said that they deserve," this is they being, I believe, Muslim women, "that they deserve to be respected and heard." And then the answer is, yeah, I got it, I heard you, I heard. And it's like, even though it's the interviewee who has the literal last word, it's like the spirit of the thing is the last word goes to the interviewer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, the whole point of that, including that final exchange, like, what does that do to put that in there? It's, you know, it's not to illuminate something about the subject of this interview. It's, you know, it's not allowing him to explain himself. Right. It's to guide you to this conclusion that he's a bad man.
Yes. And I think there'd have been a way to do that's just a little bit more subtle, where it's and also it's not even about subtle, it's that would leave the interviewer as a personality out of it, and where you don't have to where you could come away with the thought that Bernard-Henri Lévy is bad news, but you wouldn't have any opinion about the interviewer as a good or bad person. And I feel like there's something very now about there needing to be that extra piece where the interviewer has a personality and that of the voice of good personness.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if it's down to those two things, I prefer the overt attempts to manipulate the audience to a more subtle one, because at least then you can definitely see that it's happening and, you know, draw your conclusions as needed.
I mean, I think it depends. I think some people truly do have like silly views on something, and have allowing a journalist to kind of just let them show themselves for who they are and what they think is a part of journalism. I don't think that's, you know, I think it just depends. I think, but it's not necessarily going to be manipulative. I think in this case, it just seemed like there was kind of a French and French Jewish context, sort of historical context, kind of missing. But I would think that, since I spent like my entire 20s studying that. So
yeah, I mean, that's not my area of expertise, but what it reminded me of was how the media treated Catherine Deneuve and other French women who were critical of the Me Too movement, where, you know, sort of a similar deal, like they had things to say about it. They had points to make, and you could agree or disagree. But there was a lot of this coverage that was sort of very intently trying to not just present their views accurately, but to guide audiences toward the conclusion that their views were bad and wrong.
Well, it's also this, it's exactly because it's relating it. I mean, I think these things relate in terms of this notion that, like, I mean, there are places where if you just sort of speak in, I would say, sort of objective terms, where maybe France gets something right and other places where the US gets something right. But there's this type of discussion of France specifically, but also just other countries generally, where it'll be like, how could they do something differently than what would be done in the US?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, maybe France is getting it wrong, but that doesn't mean that the US has everything figured out, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Or like or certain things will make sense in a French context that don't entirely in a US one. And I should also point out that there are plenty of French feminists who are in favor of the Me Too movement, and it's not always Catherine Deneuve, although she is certainly one to listen to if she has something to say interesting sometimes. I think we have another leggings topic that we have to just briefly touch on, though, yes, because it's just funny. I don't know that we'll spend super long on this one, but the Leggings Mom. Who's Leggings Mom?
Leggings Mom. Leggings Mom was she went to visit Notre Dame, right?
Mm-hmm.
The university where her sons were in attendance, or her son. One son, two sons?
She has 4 sons, but I think.
Are they all there? Anyway, she...
That would be tricky, yeah.
While there, witnessed several young women on campus wearing leggings, and wrote an open letter to, I believe, the university newspaper, which they urging these women to not wear leggings, to wear jeans instead, because for God's sake, men can see you. Mm-hmm. Don't you realize that men can see you? And you know, haven't you considered what a terrible hardship it is for men to see your butt? I mean, that basically sums it up, right?
It does. And okay, so there are like, I'm just gonna, because I don't want to because we have other, perhaps
more important,
even more important, even more compelling topics that I also want to have us cover. So there are several things about this. Thing number one, which has come up also on Twitter. Since when do parents write op-eds in the student newspaper? I was the opinion editor of one of the University of Chicago student newspapers. Never did a parent submit an op-ed, so I don't know if we would have published them or not. It never came up. Occasionally a professor would. That was even rare. A parent, I do not remember that ever happening. So that was
that's crazy.
Then there's the ship has kind of sailed on the leggings as too sort of sensuous for like in secular-ish society. I guess I don't quite know enough about Notre Dame to know how religious it is, but I would assume it's Catholic, but right. Well, then I just remember that there were some of these like photos, much like with that guy who didn't like the rainbow hair and didn't whatever, where there are some girls where they had this leggings protest, and I saw some of the photos of this, and there are these young women wearing leggings, and you wouldn't even have any sense, and this even came up in some of the reporting about it, that it wasn't clear that they were protesting anything. It's just what people wear. It didn't seem like anything. But I guess the angle of this that interested me was this weird sort of mix of like parental overshare journalism, where she's talking about her sons and what they're surely thinking, and which gets me to this, the other type of journalism, that feelings projection journalism, where for all we know, her sons couldn't care less about these leggings. We don't know anything about what her sons think about these leggings. It would be pretty odd, because she at one point says something that she didn't see her sons ogle the leggings. They didn't talk to her about it or something. And it's like,
but surely they did.
Yeah. Why would they tell their mother, oh gosh, that girl's ass is basically doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, something that's just kind of struck me about this is, like you said, it would have been unusual when you and I were at school, which was for me like 20 years ago, for a parent to submit something like this to the school newspaper. But also, like, a lot of kind of helicoptering behavior has become more common now, for like the parents of young millennials, or I don't even know if today's college students qualify as millennials.
No, I don't even know if they're millennials.
Like the thing. But I just wonder if, this idea that the presence of leggings wearing girls on campus constitutes a threat kind of ties into this like overall sense as a, where parents are hyper attuned to danger, and it's like child abductions and peanuts and women in leggings,
this ties into something that was not on our topics, but that I think came up maybe more recently, where there was just that survey of how basically no men under 30 have sex or something.
Oh, yeah. We did not have that on the list.
But it's just, so I don't think we're going to get into that too much, but it's just like this notion. And also, this also ties to me into this notion of, and this is by no means new, where there are always these articles like, the human brain is only really adult when it's like 25 or 45 or whatever. It's always some new and more absurd age. And I'm definitely not an adult yet by the standards of one of these things. But where it just seemed kind of like this notion that you would like have to, this notion that a college student wouldn't be adult enough to just deal with leggings.
Yeah,
it's strange.
And the idea that it's that it's going to cause a hardship, and that the girls are, I don't know which one I like more. The one where, because there's an example of this kind of entry into the op-ed landscape every year or so. It seems like some concerned mom of sons will write an open letter to girls about how they're being too slutty, basically, or like looking too slutty, or acting,
right,
seeking male attention too much.
Right.
And I don't know which one is worse, when as with the Leggings Mom at Notre Dame, where she seemed to think that the girls were unaware of the effect that their leggings might have. It was like, surely, if you realized what it does to men to see your butt, surely you would not wear these leggings. Or there's the ones who think that it's bad that the girls clearly do understand what kind of effect they're having. And it's like, have you no shame? Thinking of that one, it was, I think this was an explicitly Christian parent writing about how she was blocking her son's friends from their social media because they were posting too many sexy selfies.
What was the issue the Princeton mom had, though? I'm trying to remember. I know it was something where, she was telling, this was this mother of one or more sons at Princeton who was it that she didn't want women to hook up in college? She was sort of advising women to quickly snag men like her sons, while a husband,
make sure you get
a husband like one of her sons while you can. And it always so that in turn, then there's like just this notion of where are the sons in all of this. And then there was that story that whereas the Navy vet whose mother did that hashtag him too about him, and then he kind of turned it into a meme, and it seemed like first you feel bad for him, but then you kind of feel bad for the mother who's maybe kind of losing it on social media.
Yeah.
And it's good he had a sense of humor about it, but it was just where she had some whole thing about like she was concerned about him in the Me Too era, and he was like, I'm fine, why are you doing this?
Again with the danger, again with the, my son is afraid, my son is under threat from women,
It's strange. Why is it always mothers of sons then? Because there's the whole, as the father of a daughter, is this as the mother of a son? Is that a thing?
As the father of a daughter, I feel like it tends to maybe be less outward focused. Certainly I don't feel like men who are the fathers of daughters are penning op-eds aimed at young men.
No. I mean, it's parenting writing.
Put a shirt on,
I mean, it's like all parenting writing is basically, it's a very female-dominated subgenre, right? I mean, in general, I think as a father of a daughter is more something that like a conservative man might use to sort of say, to capture some feminist cred, and then everybody will complain about that on Twitter. And
yes, of course.
I think we have two more really good topics though. So I don't know.
Yeah, we should move on. We have to move on.
We have to move on. So First and second most juicy topic, perhaps, I don't know, the modern love that everybody's been talking about, the modern love column in the New York Times. I broke up with her. Wait, where is this? Oh, why am I opening this tab twice? I don't know if this is because I'm an old millennial or what, but I will have the same tab open like 5 times in Chrome. So that's what we're doing here. I broke up with her because she's white. I should say this is the title of an article. I did not break up with her, whoever she might be, because she's white. This is the title of a personal essay by Christopher Rivas, who is
he's a comedian,
a storyteller and actor. That's what he is, a storyteller and actor. So, and it's a very performance-seeming piece of writing.
Yeah, I think this illuminates a little bit what made this essay maybe not super successful as a piece of writing. Somebody, I don't even remember where I saw this, but somebody noted that they had gone looking into his like YouTube available clip history and found that all of the material in this essay had actually been previously performed on stage in one form.
That's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. And I can see how this essay, which meanders through kind of a stream of consciousness rumination on race and love and what it means to date white women as a brown man. And I think he's, is he Puerto Rican or Dominican?
Well, so this is what I was trying to figure out, how he self-identifies, because he refers to himself as, and I quote, a child of blackness. He's part Dominican, part Colombian. Does a child of blackness mean he identifies as black? I would think so, but it's not an expression I've ever heard before, but I guess I can now be a child of Jewishness, which I feel like that's good. I like this. I'm a child of Jewishness. That seems somehow more accurate than just Jewish on its own.
It's got more words, more syllables.
But it's somehow like a descriptive quality. Like I like that. Yeah. But yeah, I think also just like, so the other thing though about modern love, like I think they do sort of fact check these, and I think they do go and find the people talked about in them. I think I heard this because it's about a real woman, right? Like there's quote from this. It's been a year since I broke up with my girlfriend, and I haven't told her the real reason. And then here he is telling the New York Times, telling the world the real reason.
She is not present in this essay at all. I would be surprised if they bothered to get in touch with her, because she's just not there.
So curious. I want to know so badly. Because it just, even if like as a reason to be broken up with, it's not actually terribly offensive because it's something you can't do anything about. It's just, but it would be weird to learn why you were dumped in the Times, if that's really what's happening. Yes. I guess I feel like there were 2 separate questions this essay brought up. One was sort of like, must this man feel that he should date white women? And the other is the problem, in fact, just doing that thinking in a newspaper, in an article? Because these to me seem like very different issues. And I feel like anybody can date or not date whoever they want. Always comes when it's an issue is if you start announcing it as like in contexts that don't even have to do with dating. I don't even mean on an app or something. I mean like just in an article, like, and making some public statement about it is where I think it can be more awkward.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people noted that this, that he didn't come off super well in this essay, that maybe his editor should have saved him from himself, that maybe he should have saved this entire thing for therapy. But then again, it is, the source of his performing. So, clearly, I mean, you get the sense that this is not the first time he's told this story in public. It's just the first time he's told it in this format.
That makes sense. Well, certainly given that he is a performer and does that type of thing. So I guess part of why it was so sort of clickbait-ish was the use of the word woke.
Oh
And
yeah.
that this notion of hashtag woke, and this notion, again, either because it's a bit or because he genuinely thinks this, who knows, heart of hearts, unknowable, that he had broken up, or at least his persona had broken up with this girlfriend because of like woke people online asking him to be woke, which just seems like a very odd thing to do for an actual human being. And the
Yeah.
question is, was he doing this, or was this just something like, and was the article, I guess this was also something people were kind of debating online, like, was the article from a hyper woke position, or was it criticizing that, which wasn't? And that, I guess, was the only sort of more interesting aspect of it.
I don't think it really committed to, to
No.
either to criticizing or not criticizing.
No.
Which, is another reason why, as an essay, I don't think it was super successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of these things, like, so I guess what drew me to it was that I wrote my dissertation on basically things like this from 19th century France, where there were essays, plays, all these different things about intermarriage, about Jews and generally in this context, Catholics getting married, where there would be a ton of writing on sort of like the symbolic weight of those relationships and what it would mean, and whether this was what was going to solve anti-Semitism, or in other people's view, what would sort of dilute the Jewish population out of France. Like Napoleon had this desire for that to happen. So like, this is a very kind of like this idea that you should be giving political weight to the identity of people in relationships is not anything to do with the hashtag woke. Like, it well predates that. Like, this is super old as a way of thinking about things. But it also really reminded me, Kat, of an advice column of yours where somebody was trying to kind of, you should explain it more, but like sort of take these political ideas and apply them very sort of literally to their dating life.
Right. I mean, this was a college student who wrote in because she was, I think, I'm trying to remember how she described herself, as a working class, brown, queer, cis woman of color. And then her boyfriend was a white guy from like Appalachia or something like that, like really like someplace impoverished, and had come from like a really a difficult childhood, living in poverty with like one parent. And so she was very hyper focused on analyzing their respective levels of privilege, and basically did not see him as a person. He was just, in the entire context of this letter, she saw him as a representative of like the white cis hetero patriarchy, and
Right.
basically did not see him as an individual. And it was one of those things where I had the guy written into me, I'd be like, you should probably stay away from this woman because she doesn't think you're a person. But hearing from somebody on the other side of it, to say like, the way that you are engaging in matters of the heart is not serving you the same way it would if you were doing this like in your gender studies classes. Like,
Right.
This framework doesn't work for everything. What kind of strikes me about, like you said, it's not a new thing to view interracial or religiously different relationships through this political lens, but this idea that you shouldn't date outside of your race is, I mean, contemporaneously popular in another corner of politics, like on the very far right. And it's a little weird to see it suggested that something can be both like the white nationalist perspective on things and simultaneously extremely woke. But I guess
I think it's different. I think it is different depending whether you're from, this is where I'm going to be the woke baby as usual. No. That's another whole topic, the woke baby. But I think it's different if somebody, the whole Jewish angle is completely different, because there's like, if you want to have religiously Jewish children and that's something you care about, I should just say this is not something I personally, if you are somebody who cares about this, the way like Jewish law works, like it's all mixed up in a different way. But if you, I'm talking about like if you're Orthodox, something like this, a whole different topic. Mm-hmm. But I would say, I think it's different if you're Black and you will only date non-white people or only date Black people than if you're white and will only date white people, in the sense of if you are making announcements about it. I think individuals, again, people, how many, I guess it's like part of what I find just so striking is how many, what is the pool of possible dates for anybody? Maybe it's different with the whole online stuff, but like,
yeah, well, this occurred to me too. Is it in a certain
like, aren't you just dating a few people, like how is it even coming up?
Right. Well, I was wondering, is it a form of privilege in a certain way to be able to categorically eliminate, an entire race of people from your dating pool?
I think it's just kind of, for most people, I think it's just unrealistic. And I think what I find, and this is something I find, again, going back to the Jewish example, is that there's a lot of kind of after the fact political justification of like if somebody Jewish has married in, it's like, oh, well, that's because I put value on that. And then if they married out, it's like, well, that's because I'm more universalist. And I think it's like it's really hard to find somebody you can like stand to see across from you at the breakfast table, like 10 years in, 20 years in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like most people are not going to be that compatible with most other people. And I think for people living in a mixed society, I don't think very many people do have the privilege to, like so much so that I wouldn't even know if I could call it privilege. Like it's just, I think people just go with whoever they're most compatible with. And I don't know that many people would actually have the principles to, like, it almost seems like it would have to be for like the point of a stand-up thing. I don't know that, like, I don't think there are people ending relationships that are going well for principle of the thing reasons very often in actual life. In a personal essay more, maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Hi.
Hello, Cattail.
Yeah, this has been happening back and forth the entire time.
And as well it should. So I think I hear baby crying and it's making me anxious. So I think we should probably do the last topic because it's so amazing.
Right, yeah. Real quick hit on soap dispenser husband.
Soap dispenser husband is the best thing to ever happen on the internet. Overlooked, perhaps best thing. So this comes from a tweet from the writer Robin Beth Schaer, Schaer, Schaer? Anyway.
I don't know.
Who tweeted, okay, I'm going to read the whole tweet, okay? Or actually, I'm going to read two tweets because they're short. Mm-hmm. The first one, my friend and her husband lived in an apartment that had a soap dispenser installed on the edge of the kitchen sink. When they moved out after 2 years, he marveled to her, quote, "It's amazing how that dispenser never ran out of soap this entire time," end quote. Women's work is truly invisible. And then the next tweet that kind of follows up on this from the same person, she never told him the truth. He still thinks wistfully of that amazing, magical soap dispenser they had once. End quote. So, Kat, soap dispenser husband.
Boy, even though that tweet is short, there's a lot to unpack in it. One of the things that really struck me about it right away is when she ends it with women's work is truly invisible. It's like, there's nothing inherently gendered about refilling a soap dispenser.
Or is there? Is that the emotional labor of the home?
Are you really filling it with your lady, apparatus?
That's tricky. Yeah.
I think, first of all, that there's nothing inherently gendered about, the activity itself is not inherently gendered.
Well, I guess the point is more that even if the activity isn't inherently gendered.
But I'm also...
first of all, is it real? Do we think this is a real husband? Or do we think this too is a bit?
I doubt that he still wistfully thinks about it.
But do you think these are real people at all, or is this just some kind of like...
I believe it. I just don't think that it demonstrates that what she says, but it demonstrates. And the other thing is, like, not just, that there's nothing inherently gendered about this, but that the thing that makes the work invisible is not that a woman is doing it. It's that it's like a minute menial task that takes 5 seconds that, unless you announce that you're doing it, nobody is going to ever notice it.
Which was another thing. There was an article in the Times, I think, like in the style section or something a while back, that was about how men always announce when they do a task in the house. And I read this and I thought, oh my goodness, this is not a trait of mine I'm happy about, but I have definitely said, don't want to say every day, but I have certainly said, I unloaded the dishwasher, just to like make that point. I have announced a chore done, both just to make it clearer that it doesn't still have to be done, and because I'm sort of proud of myself that I did it. And I guess I think that, so I do think, like, to give that tweet, which went super, super viral and people really it resonated and all this, the benefit of the doubt. I think it's true that, like, household labor, certainly when they're kids, but even without, can be very gendered in heterosexual relationships, which doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that the woman's always doing more in general than the man, but it means that things might divide in a way that can be fraught in a way that just wouldn't come up like in a same-sex relationship where, the roles, like things would be different. Right. So I think I get that. And in terms of the refilling of the soap, I guess the question is, what I wondered is, like, is this husband not doing anything himself? Is he doing something equivalent to refilling soap and not talking about it?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. I mean, the thing to me is, like, yes, traditionally keeping the house has been a woman's job. And so, you do, as with all traditions, you end up reproducing that sometimes, down the line as you go along. But in this day and age, nobody can force you to refill the soap dispenser without your consent. So if you are living in a household and you have this very gendered division of labor where the woman is doing more of the work, like, that's not just happening to her. Like, she's got to be agreeing to it in some way, shape, or form. The thing that I keep thinking about is, like, how much, so the guy, thought the soap dispenser just magically never ran out, which means, who knows, maybe he only used it once a month. So, perhaps
maybe his hygiene is a little,
well,
or he's just using soap somewhere else.
Yeah, because I don't wash my hands in the kitchen sink very often, because we don't even have a built-in soap dispenser, but I don't want to use
nor do we
on my hands. But it's not just that he would have had to be like, okay, let's say he was incurious about how the soap dispenser came to be continuously full. She also had to do her part to make sure that he never knew she was refilling it. Like, she never refilled it in front of him. She never mentioned refilling it. She never put, like, soap refills on their mutual shopping list. Yes. She never told him to pick it up. Like, she created part of this situation.
Well, I think we will have come full circle, which is perfect. There's a weird, it's almost like the cool girl, right? Where, like, this sort of tension between wanting to, perhaps for this, I still think possibly fictional woman, to maintain this kind of, like, this house, like a 1950s housewife house, but also to somehow, like, have a feminist complaint about that, when the option could have just been, don't constantly refill the soap. Like, I just find, like, if there's something in my household that, like, I don't want to do this time, and gender will inform it, but maybe not so specifically like this, I just say, like, let's, like, you do that, I do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can talk to your spouse. It's okay. Like, and if it's not, that's a problem, but maybe not a problem with humanity. There's systemic aspects of it, but it's more, like, specific.
I think that sometimes the complaint is that the conversation has to happen at all. And it's funny that you mentioned that you described this as emotional labor, because I would never.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is there have been these articles, and there's even, like, a new book that people are complaining about, actually.
Right.
But
it's not emotional labor. Refilling a soap dispenser is just labor. It's just
oh yeah.
dumb,
I mean, I agree with that.
minute labor. It's the one of these millions of little menial tasks that keeps a household going. The one thing that I will say is that I think in terms of what's gendered, you do sometimes end up with men who grew up in a house where, their mom ran the household and everything was taken care of by the mom. And they do expect to reproduce that dynamic in their adult lives to the point where when they get married or move in with a woman, they try to kind of regress to this state of like childlike obliviousness as to how the household runs. And, that's a thing that women generally don't do. And that sometimes, that's when the conversation has to happen.
That's interesting. I guess I'm just like sort of messy and I don't know.
Well, it's not just about being, it's not just about picking up after yourself, but about things like, making sure that like, I don't know, like all the dumb little things, making sure the fridge is cleaned out regularly or that the bills get paid or that the soap dispenser gets refilled. My favorite story about a guy like this actually is the ex-fiance of a friend of mine. They did not end up getting married, maybe for this reason, who called her at work to ask if they had any fish sticks. And when she was like, "Where are you?" It turned out he was inside their house.
Oh no.
calling her. But you can kind of see the wheels turning there. Like, I have this girlfriend whose job it is to maintain the household. So if I want
maybe we are on the side of maybe it's all real and this soap dispenser husband is just a fish sticks type guy.
It's entirely like, I believe that he exists. I just don't think that his, the illusion of the everlasting soap dispenser is entirely his fault. I think that it's, something that this woman had her hand in creating. And if she wasn't happy about that, she should have said something or done something differently.
That makes sense. So how do we wrap this up? So many different topics, the soap dispenser, the leggings. I don't know.
We don't have to make a clean ending. I can hear your baby agitating.
Everybody probably can. So, well, there is a fairly gendered thing that has to happen now to feed her. So I'm going to go do that. Not on the Blogging Heads, however.
I'm going to go teach yoga right after this. So in that way we have
hopefully in jeans, in a nice thick pair of jeans.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't want to accidentally titillate any male, students.
That could be too traumatizing for their mothers.
Who came in to the yoga studio not expecting to see women in yoga pants.
Definitely not. All right. Well, this has been fun as always.
This has been Feminine Chaos.
It certainly has. Bye.
Bye.